And when you mentioned Jeb Bush, the audience just, I mean, it wasn't positive at all. It was a very negative reaction. And Jeb Bush tried to explain they do it out of love. When people come here illegally, they do it out of love comments. And he said, look, I've been saying this for years. The same thing. There's no conflict at all. And he continues to conflate legal and illegal immigration because he says we need to have sensitivity to the immigrant experience. Well, I have an enormous amount of sensitivity to the immigrant experience, the legal immigrant experience. Joining us now is Craig Shirley, the Reagan biographer, author. He's a CEO of Shirley and Bannister, which is a great PR branding firm here in Washington, D.C. area. And he served back in 1984 as the Director of Communications for the National Conservative Political Action Committee. And he wrote a very interesting piece, I thought, last week about Reagan and immigration. People cite Reagan's 1986 amnesty and I think open borders types. They say, well, Reagan would be with us. Well, is that really true? Craig joins us now. Craig, great to talk to you as always.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm very well. So where are we on this issue? I mean, Jeb Bush, perhaps, I mean, some people think he floated that little trial balloon to see what the reaction would be. But I've heard him say similar things before, so I don't know how surprising it was.
Right.
But where are we on Reagan and immigration? I mean, you've studied Reagan, you knew Reagan, and look, he was the guy who signed that 1986 amnesty into law.
Yep. And what people forget about the Simpson-Mazzoli Act, Laura, is that there were far fewer illegal immigrants here at the time that covered. One. Two is everything Reagan did has to be judged within the shadow of the Cold War. We were, by 1986, actually the tide had been turned against Soviet communism. We were winning the world debate. Reagan had the Soviets on the defensive in Afghanistan and Central America. He wasn't about to hand Gorbachev a PR coup by force. If we were the island of freedom, he wasn't about to hand Gorbachev a PR coup by forcibly evicting 3.5 million people. The other thing is, don't forget, a lot of these illegals were political refugees from Cuba and Nicaragua. So there was also the political component to all of this, which is really what our immigration policy was about for many years until Ted Kennedy in the mid-'60s. It was really more about religious and personal persecution coming here. Even the great wave of Irish who came here was because of persecution by the British. You know, the mythology is about the potato famine, and that was a factor. But it was also the same thing with the Germans who came here in the late 1900s.
Well, so you also mentioned the Cuban boat people that were coming over mostly in the 80s at the time, and Reagan's reaction to that.
Well, he was supportive of it, obviously more so than Bill Clinton when Clinton sent back Elian Gonzalez. But I guess that illegal immigrant didn't fit in the political framework when you've got to consider the politics of Fidel Castro. I mean, there's consistency and then there's inconsistency, and I think Clinton kind of summed it up when his behavior with Elian Gonzalez.
What would you think when you look at how the enforcement aspect of the Simpson-Mazzoli
it was never enforced.
Was never put into effect.
Never enforced. It had very, very strict requirements on citizenship and paying penalties and back taxes, and none of it was ever enforced when Bush 41 came into office. So it's just like a lot of laws in this country that simply go ignored.
So you think, and it's hard, what would Reagan think? But, I mean, I can't imagine he'd be happy.
Well, I mean, look, Reagan used a phrase in 1964 in his speech for Goldwater. He said, maximum freedom consistent with law and order. So he wasn't a radical libertarian, but he didn't believe in the police state either. But he believed in the delicate balance of the Constitution, which is where the debate is today. Is that when you and I talk about conserve, we talk about conserving the freedoms in the Constitution for health. Yeah.
Our sovereignty. Without
Absolutely.
that, we don't have a country, Craig,
We don't have a country. Exactly. And, is that I think that part of that quote that I pulled up from Reagan about the Haitian refugees and saying these are illegal immigrants and they're just simply coming here for a better life, that's not enough of a case for citizenship, simply to come here for a better life. The Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, your poor, yearning to be free, not yearning for a better Xbox.
Yearning, as Paul Ryan said, just to work.
Yeah.
I mean, we just want to, anyone who wants to work here can come here. Well, that's going to be a crowded place.
What are we doing? The other thing, too, is Reagan talked about a revolution without borders, and what he meant was exporting our ideas, not our military muscle, not nation building, but simply ideas to other countries to build their own free market and freedom-based societies so that they wouldn't have to feel this need to illegally cross the border into the United States.
I've heard some Jeb supporters or people who think he should run say things.
I think he should, too.
Yeah, say things like, well, he's the next Reagan. He has the potential to be the next Reagan, to pull in all elements of the conservative movement. What is your reaction to that?
Look, is whether or not he's the next Reagan, I think, is probably beyond debate. On the other hand, is that we were there in the 70s, and as I tell people, is that Ronald Reagan wasn't Ronald Reagan before Ronald Reagan was Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean is that he was hated by the elites, the Washington elite, the Republican elite. They thought he was a certified Yahoo. He was the George Wallace of the Republican Party. He was a grade B actor with premature orange hair, which, by the way, that's a direct quote from Gerald Ford in the 70s about Ronald Reagan, is that he was not the beloved figure. Now, I'm not saying that Jeb Bush has the potential to be that, because Jeb Bush doesn't have the same perspective on freedom and justice that Reagan did. Reagan was a philosophy based on the individual, whereas Jeb Bush is kind of a watered-down version of what his father and his brother both believed.
Yeah, well, and I think the establishment is embracing.
Yes.
Establishment is embracing Jeb Bush, right?
Well, yes, no doubt about it. The establishment is absolutely. Now, they are losing the intellectual debate. They still control the levers of power at the Republican National Committee in Washington and K Street.
Why do they, Craig? I mean, I said this on Saturday in New Hampshire to the 600-700 people there. I was trying to get to the point that if you want power, you've got to win. I mean, if you want real power, then you have to win.
No, but you infiltrate. Mm-hmm. Henry Kissinger was a Reagan basher for his entire life. During the 1980 campaign, he said, no, Reagan is the only one who's not equipped to conduct foreign policy. John Connally is, George Bush, Howard Baker, but Reagan wins the nomination. All of a sudden, Henry Kissinger is there, showing up, giving, policy briefings to a Reagan, then ends up on the Central America Commission in 1983. This is what people who crave power do, is the proximity to power, is they infiltrate.
And I think what happened with our culture, and, we're talking domestic politics, but the culture has been so formidable in shaping young minds, and I think to a large extent, conservatives abandoned the culture in the 1970s, mostly, leading into the 80s, leaving the culture to the left to dominate. So whether it's in the university settings or in filmmaking or music or advertising even.
Sure.
And so the people say, what happened to our country? What happened? How can young people's views on these core social issues and even political issues have changed? Well, right. Guess what? We didn't engage the culture as we needed to.
Right. Well, but it is the essence of the desire for power is to either come up with a different idea or to overtake existing institutions. And the left has done that. Obviously, I'm not saying this is a conservative. This is a matter of historical fact, whether it's Hollywood, which was dominated by patriotic men in the 30s and 40s and 50s, or whether it's education, the academy, or whether it's the national media or government. But then now, what are the institutions of the right that are under siege? The family, the Pentagon, the church, all those institutions of the right are now under siege by the left. These are the American Jacobins, which is to flip power from one group of people to another group of people.
Craig Shirley, it is great to get your perspective. His piece, Run, Jeb, Run, I think I tweeted it, and I posted it, and I Facebooked it. I think I did everything, but I loved your piece. Craig, you're just so great. Thank you so much for joining.